So I want to talk to you today about your bio, and namely, the mistakes that I see most artists making. So I know it's not easy to talk about yourself, to talk yourself up, to write about yourself in third person, which you should do in your bio, but your bio is really, really important. Like, you cannot get away from this. And so I wanted to talk today, instead of what you should do, I wanted to talk about the things you should not include in your bio, because there are a couple of them, and I want to highlight the top 5. First thing you do not need to include in your bio is you don't need to tell me about past members. Unless they're super famous, I don't need to know who was in your band before. I don't know why, but I see this in a lot of bios, and it kind of falls into the category of like what ends up making it really long and rambly, and no one needs that. So current members only, please. Second thing that I do not need to see in your bio is your origin story. Again, unless it's very clever or very creative or just sort of like mind-boggling and everyone you've ever told has been like, oh my god, wow, that's crazy. You don't need to include it, because most origin stories are not interesting. I don't need to know if you met on Craigslist or you met in college or you met in high school. Like, it doesn't matter. You know, if it seems relevant to say you've known each other since you were children running around naked in the backyard, then sure, go ahead, throw that in there. But otherwise, it doesn't, nobody cares. It's not adding enough to the story, so leave the origin story out. You also don't need too many accolades. Now, don't get me wrong, you definitely want accolades in there. So if you've had any awards, you've played major festivals, even if you've played some really cool things around town or some really unique venues like an art gallery or a bowling alley, you do want to include that stuff. But you don't want it to be so long that it's like boring, you know? It can almost have the opposite effect. You might think, well, if I have 20 amazing things, like just pick the top 2 or 3 and put them in there. Otherwise, it just sort of weighs the whole thing down. Fourth thing I never, ever want to see in a bio is first person writing. It's weird. It's really, really weird. It has to be in third person. It's really as simple as that. It also makes it a little bit easier, I think, for you to write when you're writing in third person, because it sort of takes you out of it so that you can write a bit more objectively. But yeah, whatever you do, do not write in first person. The last thing that I never want to see in a bio is fluff. So I get this one a lot. Like, I understand as a new band, you might feel a little bit weird about, you know, like, what do I even include if I haven't played out a lot, if I haven't released many albums, like nothing's really happened. Well, that doesn't mean you just put in random stuff. So there is a way to tell a story with it, and I would love to do a video on this, you know, maybe even on the flip side next week. But you don't want to just include fluff. So what do I mean when I say fluff? I mean, I don't need each band member's backstory. I don't need to know how you're so incredibly unique sounding. If you're unique, I'll know when I listen to it. Like, you don't need to tell me that. I don't need to know about all of your influences. I do want to hear a couple of your influences. Like, I want to hear 2 or 3 bands that you sound like. I think that's very important. But I don't need to know about, you know, your 18 favorite bands and how each of them, this one influences the jazz sound and this one influences the rock sound. It's too confusing and it's not interesting. So as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, why don't I do a video next week that talks about what to include in your bio? But for now, just know, like, those 5 things, please don't put it in your bio. Just focus on the story, and more on that to come next week. But if you liked this, if it was helpful, let me know in the comments, what was your biggest takeaway? Maybe even which one of these was in your bio that you're now gonna take out? Let me know.